Next up, surviving cancel culture. The thing that made me think about this was the story of former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, which unfolded this week, nominated to become trade envoy for Britain and is now appointed, but nearly wasn't appointed because cancel culture came for him. And I want to cover that and deal with it, but then I want to spend just a moment reflecting on surviving cancel culture. The reason for that is that I have been speaking to a lot of groups, and it's really coming out to me that I think younger people in particular are feeling the strain of the fact that their opinions might work against them in their lives, and they want to know how on earth to deal with it. The fact that there's this threat to their success. But first, the facts about the story, and then the reflections. But cancel culture, it's becoming more and more common, and this is how it unfolded for Tony Abbott in the last week. He has been made trade envoy for Britain, so they weren't successful on this occasion. But news of his impending appointment emerged to cancel culture types, and an open letter was written to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It was undersigned by a slew of celebrity types, including Sir Ian McKellen, Russell T Davies, and Lord Michael Cashman, a House of Lords member. They all objected to his appointment, and a bunch of others. The reality is I really don't know any celebrities, so I read all the names, but I have no idea. I knew these guys were famous because I read it in the news. But there was a bunch of famous people, apparently. More importantly, this is what the letter said. It said, quote, "As committed equality and environmental activists, we the undersigned urge the government to reconsider its proposed appointment of Tony Abbott as a trade envoy to the UK Board of Trade. This is a man who described abortion as the easy way out and suggested that men may be by physiology or temperament more adapted to exercise authority or to issue command. This is a man who described himself as threatened by homosexuality and vigorously campaigned against the ultimately successful referendum in Australia to allow same-sex couples to marry. This is a man who has suggested that climate change is probably doing good and who downplayed the link between extreme weather and bushfires at the height of this year's Australian bushfire crisis. For all these reasons and more besides, this man is not fit to be representing the UK as our trade envoy. If the government is truly committed to an outward-looking future for Britain, to tackling climate change and to creating an equal society for all, it should reconsider the proposed appointment of Tony Abbott." An equal society for all. Such noble sentiments, right? Clearly more equal for those with the right political opinions than for others, right? But this pile-on continued. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon told Sky News UK, quote, "Tony Abbott, he's a misogynist, a sexist, he's a climate change denier, and he's not the kind of person who should be a trade envoy of any kind of envoy for the United Kingdom." The former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd then got in and piled on, and he said this: "Just what you want is your pin-up boy for a modern, globalising, post-Brexit Britain, a rolled gold, misogynistic, climate change denialist, pioneer of 21st century knighthoods for the antipodes. What on earth were the British government thinking?" Is it just me, or has Kevin Rudd changed? A lot. I mean, I never particularly liked the guy, but far out in recent years. Anyway, he's all saying nasty things about the Bible and everything. Anyway, Julia Gillard also responded to British journalists who replayed her famous "he's a misogynist" speech, and she said she stood by every word. Now, Britain has just come through Brexit. Global trade is really, really important to its growth and development as a non-EU member. Coronavirus is wreaking a fair amount of havoc over there right now. They're going to need to come out of that strong, recover fast economically. Trade is going to be a very big part of it. And I remember Tony Abbott's prime ministership pretty well for a few reasons. I mean, it wasn't long ago, but for a few reasons. One was that it was very, very short. But the other one was this, that even though it was very, very short, there was something extraordinary that he achieved. And that was 3 big trade deals between Australia and China, Australia and South Korea, and Australia and Japan. Those 3 countries collectively account for about 50% of Australia's exports. And just as well he got China in then, right? I don't know that they would be particularly keen now, given the way relations have soured. But to strike so many good trade deals with such economic superpowers is an extraordinary achievement. But that's the thing about cancel culture, see. It takes your opinions and it cancels you on that basis. Not on the basis of your skills, your competence, your track record, your suitability, or any serious understanding of who you actually are, what your personality actually is, or what your character might actually be like. In fact, it doesn't even really look at what your opinions are. It decides that it doesn't agree with you politically, and so it caricatures what your opinions might be, and it attacks the caricatures, as we just saw. What really are his crimes? Well, he didn't support same-sex marriage, he's pro-life, he isn't a climate catastrophist, and he thinks men and women are different. If you put those 4 things before the average Brit, the average Australian, the average person, and said, how many of these do you agree with? Boy, you'd be hard-pressed to find that many people who wouldn't at least tick 2 boxes, in my view. Tony Abbott's lesbian sister, Christine Forster, to her great credit, released the following statement, which was very good. She said, "It is nothing short of dishonesty for commentators and politicians who do not know Tony to label him a homophobe and a misogynist for the purposes of scoring cheap political points. As a woman who has always been part of his life and who came out to him as gay in my early 40s, I know incontrovertibly that he is neither of those things. In reality, he is a man of great conviction and intellect, an unabashed conservative, but with great compassion, respect for others, and an indelible sense of doing what is right." And she goes on to point out that he served doggedly in the rural fire service, as he has done for years, during the height of the Australian bushfire crisis, which made me think, you know, these ivory tower types over in the UK who are attacking this guy because he says that the bushfires weren't fully the result of climate change. Well, meanwhile, he's risking his life on the front line for weeks, probably months, fighting those fires, doing extraordinary good work. I mean, it's just... It's no sense of a person's true character, just blind character assassination because they know that he does not share their politics. And it's all about thought. It's not about doing. It's not about deeds. That's something else that always gets me about this. The fact is, Tony Abbott is qualified for the job. There's nothing wrong with his character. That's just a cancel culture mob who vent their political disagreements in the lowest and most arrogant way possible, which is by cancelling them. Now, that raises something for me. And this is what I was really reflecting on. This is the latest example of cancel culture, not successful on this occasion. It often is successful, and it's increasingly more successful. But we've had several big examples in Australia in recent times. You think of people like, Israel Folau, obviously, but all the many cases that we deal with at the Australian Christian Lobby, they come in all the time. And I want to make some observations. If cancel culture is on the rise, and it could well continue to be, and if we are moving into an era that has less room for conservative thinking, but also for Christian thought and behaviour, then that means that something is changing. And it could well continue to change. And it used to be, you know, and our parents experienced this, that if you worked hard, if you got good grades, if you played by the rules, if you were a diligent individual, normally, on the balance of probabilities, you could expect success from life. That was the natural rhythm of things. You could save for the house, you could get promotions, you could become financially secure, you could add letters after your name, you could belong in the world of professionals, in the world of business, in workplaces, whatever. We're in a time now where your beliefs put that at risk. It's a bit of a wild card element in your life. What if your views are exposed? What if you say things? What if people who can influence your reputation and your progress disagree with you? What if it costs you? What should you do? Should you go quiet? Go underground? Should you pretend? Fake it that you're different? Or maybe there's an element to this which says you shouldn't bother. You shouldn't be diligent. You shouldn't try. What would be the point? I want to suggest that all of those would be the wrong answers. In fact, they'd be the opposite of the correct answers. Let me remind you in this regard of a fabulous biblical example, which you should go and read about after this episode. Daniel, a man who served God, but lived in a pagan world where beliefs and opinion and his religion and his convictions could cost him everything, far more than it could cost you or I today. He was nonetheless totally diligent. He fully participated in his education and his training, and he took it seriously. He was totally convictional. He spoke about his beliefs openly, was unshaken in his conscience, and served God first and foremost. He did all of those things. He must have seemed at the time mad, foolish, ill-advised, and doomed when he refused, for example, to eat the king's food. The boss of the program he was in actually said to him, "This is going to cost me my head." And presumably it could have cost Daniel his head as well. He was only a teenager. But he declined for a higher conviction. And God saw that and made sure he was no worse off for it. In fact, he was better off for it. And it was the same when he declined to bow with the masses before the idol, and he faced the fiery furnace. Again, when he had to interpret dreams to kings, which could have cost him his life, he nonetheless told the truth and faithfully gave the interpretation. Again, when he refused to stop praying daily at his window, he faced the lion's den. The question comes, was he foolish or mad or irresponsible? Do you know that day when he refused to eat the king's food as a teenager? That was the first day of the rest of his life. Not because it was strategic in some natural sense, but because God saw it. Daniel could have schemed his life out, seen where he wanted to be, and could have adopted the strategy he thought that he needed in the strategic natural world to get him there, to engineer his beginning so that it would reach his end. And that would have meant completing the training, getting to the top of the pack, serving in senior positions for the king of Babylon. That's what it would have looked like. And he would have run quiet, and he would have been strategic, and he would have made sure that his decisions were things that looked like they would get him there. He would have been silent and run under the radar. But you know something? He trusted God instead. He did what was right, not what was strategic. He followed conviction rather than convenience, and he got there anyway. He served at least 4 kings, probably 5, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Belshazzar of Babylon, Darius the Mede, Cyrus of Persia at least. He was at one point something akin to the prime minister of the world's superpower. The narrative part of the book of Daniel concludes with these words. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian, having also recorded success in the kings before that. There's a verse in Scripture that says, and this is important for everyone who's thinking about these issues, they that honour me I will honour. That's something my parents taught me. And I believe firmly that God will not see you any worse off for doing right and putting your Christian calling first. There's many who will attest to that to you today, who are alive, and many who are listening and watching will nod their heads. It's the fact that God is trustworthy. Our faith in him is never misplaced. Daniel's a great prototype of it, but it's the lived experience of so many. It doesn't mean that we'll all become senior government officials. Believe me, it's not all it's cracked up to be anyway. But it does mean that God leads people to a place where after years have passed, they say, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Here's the point. Daniel ended up where God always wanted him to be, not despite doing the right thing. And we sometimes think of it like that, as if he did the right thing, but he still managed it. No, it wasn't despite doing the right thing. It was because he did the right thing. Remember that. And I think that's a principle that will serve everyone well in a world where cancel culture, particularly for the Christian thought, is growing and growing. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe by hitting the icons below, and make sure you hit the grey bell as well so you get notified when there's a new video. And if you want to watch more, you can click on the links right about here. Thank you.